Thank you, Lowkey, for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm so glad to talk to you about so many things. Preparing for this interview was a little difficult to even know where to begin, just because you do so much in the way of creativity and political activism. So I'm hoping to talk to you about that, and of course, how that relates to justice and freedom for Palestine, including, of course, ending the genocide in Gaza. So perhaps we can open with how you first came to wed or combine hip-hop with pro-Palestinian activism.
Well, I think to understand the route for myself to where we are today, you would have to look at the community that I come from. In Ladbroke Grove, in West London, you have a strong affinity felt by many of the young people with Palestinians. You have a strong Moroccan community, and Palestine has always represented a cause which is emblematic of a lot of the contradictions of our age.
Do you think, as an art form, it's particularly effective in being able to effectively contest power in ways that other art forms cannot?
It allows very direct communication, and much in the same way we look at the poets of Arabic-speaking societies, the way in which they used their work to directly confront political actors and criticize them, not only in forensic ways, but also in ways that could then become popular slogans. And so for me, I saw music as a way to do that, a way to apply political pressure. And there's the other side of it too. The Palestinian poet Mahmoud Darwish, in his beautiful poem فكر بغيرك, he says, لما تحرر نفسك باستعارات فكر بغيرك من فقدوا حقهم في الكلام. When you liberate yourself with metaphors, think of others, those that lost the right to speak. And that is something that I am keenly aware of with my music, and ultimately where my final solidarity lies. And I think that that has both empowered and limited what I've been able to do within the music industry, traditionally speaking. Because on one side, if you feel a sensitivity to that suffering, you allow yourself a level of intimacy with people that support your message, which is quite hard to obtain. But at the same time, you cut off the potential for you to rise to certain echelons of the music industry, because ultimately the music industry is an extension of the political and economic system, meaning the very same power dynamics that exist within society also exist within the music industry. So somebody who likes to feel that they can advocate for the rights of the most downtrodden is not likely to be welcomed into the halls of power and success.
For perhaps lack of a better phrase, the controversial nature of some of your work, there have been, as you know, several attempts to censor that by various actors, one being, of course, the Israeli lobby. And I'm wondering how you've been able, or how you've dealt with that, and perhaps what sorts of insights you've gained into the inner workings of the system in having to do that.
So an organization by the name of We Believe in Israel, which is led by Luke Akehurst, an arms industry lobbyist, and somebody who is on the NEC of the Labour Party, an extremely influential position within the British Labour Party, took it upon themselves to lobby Spotify to delete my music. Now, the interesting thing about that is We Believe in Israel is an outgrowth of the largest Israel lobby group in this country, BICOM. Now, BICOM is heavily integrated with the British establishment. There's several elements of crossover. A lot of its targeting is of media organizations and also political individuals, but mainly BICOM operates behind the scenes. It's currently headed by Richard Pater, who formerly was an employee of the Israeli Prime Minister's office and is a reserve in the Israeli military. Now, we believe in Israel tried to convince Spotify that my music, and particularly the song Long Live Palestine, was tantamount to incitement of violence through the use of the word intifada in the song. Now, these people are not linguists. They do not know the etymology of the word intifada. I doubt that they know Arabic. To prove incitement in the court of law is quite difficult. They certainly would fail at that with those songs, because the songs in question have not been linked to violence anywhere. But the way in which we were able to at least momentarily defeat that campaign was we directly asserted as early as possible that I was not alone. We were unapologetic. We gained support of very well-known and widely respected figures, among them Noam Chomsky, Ilan Pappé, Roger Waters, the grandson of Nelson Mandela was there too. A UN Special Rapporteur on Housing also signed the petition. And so what we communicated to We Believe in Israel straight away was, I was not apologetic. I did not agree to the framing that they had enforced, that they were trying to force on the work. And secondly, we also communicated to Spotify that there were several people that signed this petition who are worth millions. Their work streams and brings in millions for the company Spotify. Do you want to get into a conversation about people removing their work from Spotify because Spotify deletes my music? It's about applying a cost to those assertions of power. It's about making clear that these actions cannot be carried out without significant costs on the other side. And so for that reason, we were successful in pushing off the campaign to remove Long Live Palestine from Spotify.
So I have to ask, us being the UK, you living in the UK, what your own opinion right now is of the UK's government in relation to Israel versus the people of the UK, if there's a change right now in how they're regarding what's happening in Palestine. And also whether you think it's an overstatement that this massive shift that we are seeing in the UK and elsewhere has primarily to do with social media or something else?
So I think that if you look at the size of the demonstrations that have taken place in this country, it's safe to say that over 1% of the population feel deeply passionate about this issue enough to have taken to the streets in terms of actual numbers of human beings. Of course, we know that it's bigger than that. It's not just hundreds of thousands of people in the country. You have millions of people in the country that feel a deep aversion to the scale of human suffering that they are seeing and the way in which Israel is flouting so many aspects of norms of decency, even in the way that they deal with the Palestinians in Gaza. But on the other side, what you have is a British political elite. You know, at the beginning of this apocalyptic campaign in Gaza, you had the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, who had stated previously in an interview that she had close family members currently in the Israeli military. You also have, of course, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, who his father founded the company Infosys, which deals with biometric data. His wife still has tens of millions of pounds worth of investments in the company. Now, the company has 200 employees within the political unit of Israel. It has several Israeli subsidiaries, and it even had a director, Yuri Levine, who formerly was in Unit 8200 in the Israeli military. Now, in any other situation, were this to be a company that had a figure that had emerged from Russian intelligence, for example, heading it, and Rishi Sunak had this connection to the company, it would certainly be problematized in a way that this connection to Infosys simply has not been. Infosys signed a memorandum of understanding with the State of Israel to deepen their connection. You look at several Israel lobby groups in this country directly receive government funding. You also have the example of Lucy Frazier. Lucy Frazier is the Minister for Culture in this country, supposedly, as she said, in charge of the BBC. Well, before she became an MP in this country, she interned at the Ministry of Justice in Israel. Have you ever heard of anything so preposterous as that? That somebody can go from interning a foreign government and then become a minister in another government without any type of serious critical analysis of that within the media. It just simply doesn't happen. And so you have this discord between where the government is on this and where the people in the country are.
To your point, actually, the UK's complicity in all this has obviously been recognized by South Africa, which has implicated the UK government in its legal action that is currently unfolding at the International Court of Justice. And I'm wondering whether you're generally optimistic of these proceedings, or are you cautiously optimistic? How do you feel about these proceedings as a means of finally being some justice for the Palestinian people?
I would say it can't be viewed as a panacea. It will not answer all of our problems, but it's definitely a win-win. So I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. I think an interim ruling will be delivered. I think to call for Israeli withdrawal. In terms of the final verdict, we have several years to wait. Others who know far more about these things have indicated that they think it's likely that the ruling will be in the direction that we would want. But ultimately, this is all part of the dying convulsions of the Zionist idea. It's becoming more and more difficult to maintain cruelty on an industrial scale, which the Zionist project necessitates. And I think it's one aspect of that idea becoming less and less sustainable and viable.
So my last question, Lowkey, is that you've addressed or you've looked at the situation of the Palestinian people from so many different angles, from the historical, the political. You address it also creatively, and you explore, I suppose, the emotional responses that we have as people who are pro-Palestinian or allies to the Palestinian people. What, maybe drawing from that, in your view, do you believe is the source, and perhaps it's a philosophical question, the source of Israeli devastation of Palestine or Palestinian life? Like, why is this happening?
Well, you had, at the beginning of the Zionist movement, several different strands. So the dominant strand, which today is represented by the Netanyahu government, is the Jabotinskyite strand of Zionism. Now, Jabotinsky was explicitly stated that he was inspired by the fascist Mussolini. He was somebody who modeled himself on that Eastern European fascism. He also, which obviously Mussolini was not Eastern European, but an Eastern European fascism he modeled himself upon. But also his conception of the way in which to deal with the Palestinians was about brute force, and it was about understanding the balance of power being dependent on the ability to exact violence, because he also understood clearly, as all of the early Zionist leaders did, that, and these are his words, not mine, no indigenous population will accept subjugation by alien invaders. These are his words in the Iron Wall. So he was very clear about what had to be done. And so when you look at the trajectory of Zionism, yes, there were a infinitesimal amount of Zionist thinkers that advocated for an idea of peaceful immigration, non-state-centric Zionism, rather than colonialism, settler colonialism. But ultimately, they were never in the argument to win it. There were only a few followers of this type of Zionism. Today, Jabotinsky is the most recognizable name insofar as there's more hospitals, cinemas, schools, parks, roads named after Jabotinsky than there are of any other Zionist thinker within the political unit of Israel. Not Herzl, not Ben-Gurion, not Chaim Weizmann, none of the rest of them. Even when you look at, for instance, the way in which Chaim Weizmann was able to procure the Balfour Declaration, you see that it's based around weaponry and armaments, because Weizmann was a well-known scientist in Manchester, and when Britain in World War I, for the first 2 years of World War I, there was a shared arms conglomerate between British and German arms companies, meaning that you actually had, when German people were being killed, German companies benefit, and when British people were being killed, British companies benefit. But midway through World War I, Britain were no longer able to import some of the vital components they needed for smokeless gunpowder. And Weizmann came to the rescue. He provided the method through which acetone could be procured through starch. And that answered a key question for the British establishment at that time, the way in which they could produce smokeless gunpowder. And he had great credit with the British political elite, and that led to the Balfour Declaration, which was written by Chaim Weizmann himself. It wasn't written by Arthur Balfour. It was written by Weizmann and then produced by Balfour. So I think the key understanding is about the use of violence and the criticality of armaments. And that's what the Zionist movement always understood, and also the necessity for exterminating Palestinian nationhood. Those, I think, are the three clear elements that we now see manifested in Gaza and visited on top of the heads of some of the most vulnerable people in the world. It's an absolutely apocalyptic scene there.
I'd like to thank you, Lowkey, for this most illuminating discussion, to your credit, of course, your responses, and for sitting here with TRT today.
Thank you for
I
having
wish
me.
you
I appreciate it.
all the best.
Thank you, you too, Paul.